everyone. Welcome to The Obvious. My name is Sonny. I'm the COO at ABC Florida East Coast. I want to welcome you to episode 16 of The Obvious podcast.
And my name is Peter Daiga. I'm the president and CEO of Associated Builders and Contractors Florida East Coast chapter.
The Obvious podcast is a production of ABC Florida East Coast. Unless otherwise stated, all content reflects the opinions of the guests and the hosts, which is us.
And if you like The Obvious podcast, you can subscribe to it on all the major podcast platforms, such as Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, or Spotify, among others. Or watch the audio-visual version on YouTube. You can also follow The Obvious podcast on Instagram and Twitter. You can always reach out to us via email at theobvious@abceastflorida.com. Links to all the social media feeds are in the episode show notes. And if you want to help others find the podcast, please leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice. Good to see you all.
Good to see you, Sonny. Likewise, Peter. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm very excited about today's episode because, Christmas is around the corner. Thanksgiving was great. It's been, I think, a month since the elections happened. There's been a lot happening in our great country, and certainly at ABC. We've had a great end of the year. We're over 600 members. We've had growth in
mid-October.
Mid-October we hit that number. I remember.
Yeah, growth.
So we've had success in almost every facet of all our operations, whether it's events, whether it's membership, wherever we've kind of ventured into, whatever territory we've ventured into, we've been very, very successful. So we're very grateful for our staff and our team and everything we do.
Right.
But the topic today for our podcast, for our episode 16, is you. So this is the year 2024.
I got overruled.
You got overruled. That's right. Also, we don't do anything by committee, so that's great. 2024 is the year of your 25 years at ABC. So congratulations from all of us again.
Thank you.
I know we've been celebrating kind of all year with some. You're going to see some great pictures in this podcast as well, especially if you're watching this on video. You're going to really enjoy sort of a trip down memory lane. But I really wanted to kind of talk about you and your story and how you ended up at ABC and how the last 25 years have been for you, and how does it feel to kind of look back and to enjoy the impact you've had on our incredible industry. And so tell us about like your childhood and how life started, and let's start there. I know you don't like talking about it, so I'm enjoying asking you these questions.
Want me to talk about my childhood?
Yeah, so how you started. I know you're from Gainesville, which a lot of people probably don't know, even though you have that UF cup you carry everywhere. So,
well, certainly, the 25 years has flown by, no doubt about it, and it's been amazing. The people I've worked with, our leadership, a lot of the staff, Dan Shaw, who mentored me, it's just been phenomenal. And I've never been more excited, really, about even the continued future of ABC and what we can achieve and how we seem to achieve everything put before us by our board at the highest level, So that's super exciting. So me personally, my mom was widowed when I was 3 days old. My father died celebrating the birth of his first son. Wow. And so I was, my mother was uneducated, high school sweethearts. He played basketball actually for the Army, and again, died when I was 3 days old. So my mom was a widow with 2 kids, my older sister and myself. Didn't have even a high school education at that point. So several years later, she got remarried, had a half brother today, and that man adopted my sister and I. So that's where the name Daiga comes from, which has some Polish backgrounds. But he was a chemical engineer for Scott Paper Company, and he died in an industrial accident. And so my mom was widowed twice, still didn't have an education, and had 3 kids now. One was a toddler. So that's kind of, she moved to Boca Raton to be close to her parents to help raise the kids while she put herself through school, got her GED, and then went enrolled in FAU. But at that time, I think it was a 2-year school back in the early 70s or late 60s. And eventually moved back to Gainesville to go to UF and get her bachelor's and master's degree in public administration. So My mom was my hero for the most part growing up. A woman who had 3 kids, was widowed twice, had no education, and she got her education. And when she passed away a number of years ago, left my brother and sister and I, some beautiful condos on the beach in St. Augustine that, we grew up going to. And in any event, that's kind of my upbringing. I had her as a role model. She saw me, I think, before she passed away, become the chapter president here, like a year before I did it. So she was very proud of me. And so, yeah, that's kind of my background.
All right.
And I think why I have a lot of the values I have, because I had a mother who literally had to pull herself up by the bootstraps and did it successfully. And as a public administrator, she talked a lot about government and government efficiencies. And the role you're in as a public administrator is not unlike the role I'm in today.
Right.
You have multiple bosses that are elected. And they
you're running
change from
multiple
year to
agencies.
year, and you're running multiple agencies. So yeah. So anyway, that was I am always involved in and interested in politics. Again, I probably got that from my mom.
So you went to high school in Gainesville,
Went to high school, elementary school, middle school,
and then
high
you went to
school.
college in University of Florida.
Yep, went to the University of Florida.
What'd you study there?
My major was quantitative management.
Wow.
So I loved math, always have, always loved data. So never worked a day in my life doing that. Left school and went to work for the IFES, the Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences at the University of Florida, writing grants for the university, which, quite frankly, I hated. But all the time I was still doing campaigns, and I eventually worked my way up to, some paid campaigns and being paid to do campaigns. So I had moved on from IFES to an agricultural or environmental engineering firm.
What kind of campaigns were you working on?
So all sorts of different campaigns. I was actually the chairman of Ronald Reagan's campaign for his second term in Alachua County at a very young age. I was his chairman. So went to that inauguration.
Wow.
Got an invite to the inauguration and went to Ronald Reagan's second inauguration. So, but I ran, races for city commission and county commission and state house and senate races. And, in some capacity or another. And eventually you work your way up to bigger ones. And then you work your way up to where they're actually paying you and you're not just a volunteer.
Right.
So, and that's kind of when I finally got to do and get paid to do what I love, which is I left my second job as a grants writer for an environmental engineering firm and went to work for a House member because I was running his campaign. And that was in the early 90s when the Republicans were first taking over the majority in the House in Florida. A lot of people don't probably realize, but up until that point, since Reconstruction and going back to the Civil War, it was pretty much state government was run by Democrats. And at that time, quite frankly, in the 90s, I wasn't sure. I think there were a lot of people like me that weren't sure we'd ever see a Republican legislature or government in the state of Florida. But that started to all change in the early 90s, over the course of 2 or 4 years when they finally took the majority over. So the man I was working for was the first Republican to be elected in that seat since Reconstruction, a guy named Josiah Walls, who was an African-American gentleman.
That's a great
last
Southern
Republican,
name.
isn't it? Josiah Walls, was the last Republican in that district. So anyway, we knew, speaking of polling and political science, we probably knew a few weeks out from the election that we were going to win because of our internal polling.
Yeah.
So, he asked me, if we win, would you like to be my legislative aide, which I was like, for the first time in my life, I actually full-time got to get paid to do something that I loved.
Yeah.
And so I worked, how many years? 7 years, I think, for the legislature. And like a lot of people that work for the legislature, they go to work lobbying or doing government affairs work.
Okay.
The difference being, lobbyists, you kind of go to work for a firm and you might have multiple clients. And a big part of your duties and job is client development, And that's what most young kids like me at the time, when they left the legislature, would go do. And I just was not really excited about that. I wanted to go to work for somebody whose mission and philosophy I could sink my teeth into and
Support.
And
get behind.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
So how did that, where was the connection to ABC? How did that come about?
so the chief lobbyist for ABC of Florida at that time was a man named Rick Watson. And he had an employee that I knew and had some dealings with because of my work with the member. And he told me, hey, there's this organization, check them out. This is what they believe in, merit shop and free markets. And there's a position opening in the chapter in South Florida. So I thought about it. I almost did not even interview for the job because being a native kind of North Floridian, South Florida was a little bit of a
Foreign territory.
Foreign territory.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I came down and interviewed for the job with Dan Shaw, and he did, as people who knew Dan Shaw will get a kick out of this, but he did most of the talking, but eventually got an offer and came to work doing government affairs for this chapter. So
25
in 1999,
years ago. Wow.
Yeah, August 21st,
August
1999. Yep. And I've never, I've certainly I've never regretted the move, come to love South Florida. I mean, in a way that I never dreamed when I grew up in North Florida. So I love the culture, the mix of cultures and the beauty of the area.
How was the transition for you when you came to ABC, having worked in the legislature, and you're coming from Tallahassee, and you're now in our Broward County offices? What was that transition like?
Well, this chapter has we've talked about this before, I think, too, a long pedigree of supporting, government affairs work by having a full-time staff. I think we're the only chapter in Florida that I think's ever had full-time staff. So, and we had a chief lobbyist then, Rick Watson, so I got to work with him and learn from him, in terms of ABC of Florida and before he retired. So, but then we also, as today, we want the government affairs role here at the chapter to support us at all three levels of government. Even though ABC National has registered lobbyists, and I like to, a small army of lobbyists up in D.C., and we still have Carol Bowen and a chief lobbyist for ABC of Florida. It wasn't just let them handle those things and the government affairs person handle local government. It was really, all three, to put a personal mark, a chapter mark, if you will, on all three levels.
Because we're all rowing in the same direction.
Correct. Right. Correct. So so it was. I felt like at the time, I think I coined the phrase "the voice of commercial construction," because my first thing I noticed is when I would go to the halls in Tallahassee that people would assume we were the home builders. They had a little higher profile and reputation, and so the first thing we had to do was make sure people understood who we were. That we were the commercial side of things. And that was really easy because the kind of projects our members do are very iconic, as opposed to not that the houses are obviously important. We all live in one, but they're not like the mid-rises and high-rises and all the commercial structures we do. So I just kind of embarked on really awareness, and I think from day one, and that was a big part of what I had to do, I think. So
what was the biggest challenge for you when you look back now and you're like, wow, that really was a difficult journey to success, right? Like, so when you kind of started and you're like, wow, I got to deal with this issue. And I mean, like when you first started in 1999, when you look back, kind of what strikes you as not just a challenge, but really, wow, I really learned a lot from that issue or that experience?
Well, I mean, really we were starting from square one, in my opinion. Everything that a strong organization does, we were not doing or doing at a very superficial level, whether it's donations.
Do you remember how big the staff was back then?
At the chapter?
At the chapter, yeah. Here?
Maybe 5 or 6.
Wow.
Yeah, I'd say.
We're like 30 right now, full-time employees. Yeah. Wow. That's growth.
Yeah, for sure. So, but yeah, I just, I think from growing a government affairs program, we had to build a culture, obviously there was some, I think, at the chapter, or they wouldn't have budgeted and invested in a full-time government affairs person, but, the PACs and the getting involved in campaigns and LegCon, and growing that over the years, people going.
And 2 of them, D.C. and Tallahassee.
Yeah, I mean, D.C., obviously we have the national office, so they always, had that, but growing our participation was something that, I saw happen and achieve through the years. But Tallahassee LegCon was, almost a new thing, as I recall. I mean, it wasn't, so really starting from scratch there, too, in terms of expectations. So, and getting to know the people. I remember I think when I was hired, but before my official start date, ABC of Florida was having a meeting in St. Augustine. So I was just a hop, skip, and a jump over to Gainesville, hadn't moved down yet. So Dan had invited me to that conference, and I went over to that, and that immediately out of the gate, meeting all the key legislative players at the chapter, the ones that and Dan had a list, of people you got to go talk to this person, and this person. So, yeah, and Dan was a great mentor. I mean, I think from day one he was had his eyes on me and mentoring me to hopefully be a viable candidate for this board, whenever he retired and moved on. So, and that's worked out.
I will tell our audience that, we are next year going to be celebrating our 50th anniversary, our 60th in 2028. Okay.
In 2028. We were chartered in 1968, the chapter was.
Okay. And you are our third CEO in all that time. And I think that sort of stability of leadership obviously has contributed to the success. But I wonder, do you ever look back and think, wow, I am now the CEO of the largest construction trade association in the state of Florida and the largest apprenticeship education institute in the state of Florida. Like, to have built that in 25 years, with such a passion of purpose, right? And I'm sure I'll share this with our audience. Every time I've gone to you with a new idea or a new plan or a new thought, your question has always been, how does this serve our members? So I know sort of that's the culture that we have here, and that's the lens through which everything gets filtered. And I think it's interesting because you talk about building impactful organizations. Oh, yeah. And one of the things that I think we should address are all these pictures behind us, which I would love for you to kind of answer that question. Who are all these people behind us?
So all the people behind us and circles around the corner are past chairman of the board, since our inception. In the early years, they served 2-year terms, but I think that went away pretty quickly. And we're an organization, I'm proud to say, we don't generally have to and haven't recycled leadership. We have people asking all the time, how do I get on that board? And it's, for a lot of other nonprofits, you have to recycle, you don't have enough interest, or, it's a pay-to-play kind of thing. And without a doubt, these leaders have paid, a lot, both in their personal time and sacrifice, but in their treasure too, I think, to serve in this capacity. But it's not a quid pro quo, type of thing, although it's a very working board, right? It's with some expectations and, expectations outlined, in terms of what a successful leader on this board looks like. So when I was pointing out to this other board behind us, which again, I take it very personal. I think we've been blessed with good leadership. We do some very good planning around here. It takes work, but to make sure that we have some very good strategic goals established for us, and then everything we do as a staff in order to achieve those is measured by that mission and those values and providing value to our membership in the industry. So yeah.
And if you haven't been into our offices, you'll see that the board that Peter's pointing to, there's all around the office the mission statement, the strategic goals, why we exist. It's everywhere. It's part of the culture here. So, and I hate to ask you this because you are still so young and you have so much runway, but kind of, what's your desire for your legacy? Like, how do you want to be remembered as a leader here?
That's a fair
I know
question.
you're famous for your Christmas lights, and I know you have a real passion for helping people all around the world. I know you do a lot in Costa Rica. So I'm really curious as kind of how you want to be remembered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just at its core level, its basic level, somebody who, pursued with a lot of passion and dedication the mission that was given us, the mission that was given me, that I left the organization stronger, and delivering more value than when I received it. There's a couple things for sure I feel like are, part of my legacy, and I think I've told this story before, but, the first day, that I was, full day that I was hired in this position, I was receiving calls, about the Institute and having to shut down our education arm because
the economy after 2008
economy was bad.
crash, yeah.
It was they were in considerable debt to the chapter, and whatnot. So, and I would have been happy to do that if a public conversation and vote was had to remove education and workforce development from our mission. All right. If they had changed that, I would have been happy to drop it. But until they did that, I was, this is the mission you've given me. And again, back to what I really want to be remembered by is somebody who, right or wrong, it's the mission they've given us, and we review it every year, and just trying to stay true to delivering on that mission. So, I told people at that time, no, until you change the mission, we're going to pursue this, and we're going to pay back every dime. And people scoffed and laughed a little bit, and there was even periods when the CPAs were saying you got to write this money off, and you're never going to get that back. And I was like, no, we're not going to write it off because we're going to pay it back. And so I think it's survival, hopefully is a part of my legacy, and being the largest and got to the point where it's
thriving. It's not
thriving.
Just, you didn't just survive,
Correct.
It's thriving.
Yeah, so that's great. Obviously, the foundation, I take personal pride in getting that started.
Can you give our audience a little bit of a background on the foundation and how it came about?
Sure. I mean, I for a number of years before my predecessor retired, I kept pestering him to let us found our own foundation at the chapter, and he didn't really see the vision initially. The reason I saw it was because I had been around long enough, and in the capacity of the Vice President of Government Affairs, gone to enough of our bowling tournaments and golf tournaments and fish tournaments and whatever, to where we looked back and we raised over 10 years like $1 million for local charities. So we were raising $100,000 a year which were all great causes. But what would happen is we would occasionally get the phone call when somebody in our community needed help for one reason or another, and we really didn't have a way of helping them. So I was like, let us start our own foundation. We can still have these bowling tournaments and give a good portion of that to our local community partners if that's what we wanted to do, but at least we could be building our own fund so that if somebody had a problem that we wanted to be available to be able to help them. So eventually...
And that foundation is called ABC Cares, and you can go to abccares.org and look at all the good work that organization is doing and the impact that our organization is having. And that was your sort of brainchild, and that's your...
It was, and he got tired of me pestering. I think a year, maybe or two before he retired, he said, go ahead and do it, which is so I, from the get-go, had to file the paperwork with the IRS, and it takes a while for them to review it, and it's a back and forth, in terms of your bylaws and different things. So, but yeah, I think, roughly, 10 or 12 years ago, we got our IRS designation. Seed money from our chairman at the time in a golf tournament that they did. It kind of was our first big check. Yeah. And then we had the Fishers, that for a number of years kind of supported, were real believers in the foundation. But until we, in the last couple of years, got a full-time person on board to help with the development of the fund. Again, I think this chapter board set as a strategic goal $1 million endowment by 2026, in which we surpassed this past June, I think.
Incredible.
We're now up to so it's a large endowment, but just because it's large doesn't mean we don't need to grow. We've also at that same time grown the people and the professionals in the industry and their families that we've helped, and that keeps growing as well.
And this organization is having an impact. ABC Cares is having an impact nationwide, not just in our chapter region.
Yep, that's been one of the developments. Is as we've had other hurricanes or Maui fires or the bridge collapse in Baltimore. There's we've kind of put the foundation up front because it's it's a means for us doing it nationwide with our other chapters, and so. They've donated. People get the tax write-off, if you will, or break, and then we usually spend or do send 100% of whatever we collect for that particular tragedy. So
okay, last question. I know we're running out of time. We'll go over a little bit on this episode because this is a special episode. Last question. If there was one thing you would share with the audience that the audience doesn't know, that most people don't know about you, what would it be?
Well, you mentioned it's silly. I decorate a million lights at Christmas with lines of traffic on my street, and I've been doing that for years. Usually.
And what's the website? You want to share that with our audience?
SoFlo Christmas for South Florida Christmas. SoFloChristmas.com. So if you want to come out,
SoFloChristmas.com.
Yeah, I'm usually out front directing traffic and sipping wine or scotch. Between the first Sunday in Advent and the Epiphany on January 6th. So so that's a little silly something about me. I'm also I consider myself my faith is pretty important to me. So those are things. I don't know if you get to know me enough, you probably know that about me. But The background I talked about earlier, I don't talk about a lot, but that's I think very instrumental in the man that I am today. And
appreciate you sharing that with our audience. You just said the first Sunday of Advent, which a lot of people might not know when that is.
Usually the first Sunday after Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
So, yeah. So, but a period of where you're, well, anyway.
We can do another episode on
Yes, we
Advent
could.
and what that means.
So, yes.
Well, I just want to congratulate you. You're obviously an incredible leader. There's a lot of people here whose lives and careers have been influenced by you. And, I can tell you as an organization, we're very grateful for how well run this organization is. I've been in rooms with a lot of people where your name and this organization's name comes up all the time. And your reputation is incredible, and people have nothing but respect for what you've accomplished here. So congratulations on
Thank you.
25 years.
I mean, I'm humbled by that. So, but it's been my pleasure and a real joy. And again, this is ABC. This is what we do for our members and for this industry. And we probably really only scratched the surface, in many ways. But happy to do it. Proud to do it for our members. So.
Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for listening and honoring us with your time. We look forward to sharing another episode with you very soon.
For comments, send us an email, please, at theobvious@abceastflorida.com.
Here's to another 25 years.
Thank you. All right.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Ciao.